Now available in paperback and Kindle. Vampires stalk the darkness of the Eternal Night. Get your copy of Eternal Night in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com. A couple of days ago, Disney Plus announced that there would be a Armor Wars series based on the classic Iron Man storyline, Armor Wars, from the 1980s. And an Iron Man fan like myself should have been happy to hear about that announcement. However, I'm not happy about Disney Plus's announcement of an Armor Wars series because in their adaptation of the classic Iron Man Armor Wars story, which took place in Iron Man Volume 1, issues 225 to issue 231, the lead character in the Armor Wars was Tony Stark, and as I see it, you can't have Armor Wars without Tony Stark. Now, your Disney Plus believes that James Rhodes could be a suitable stand-in for Iron Man because in the comics he was a stand-in for Iron Man during storylines like the Secret Wars, where your Tony Stark was in the middle of an alcoholic binge as related to comics written by the late great classic writer Denny O'Neil. However, the Armor Wars was a storyline created by legendary Iron Man writer David Michelinie, and that legendary Iron Man story needs to have Tony Stark at the forefront because what motivates Tony Stark to go on this crusade is something very personal to him. Now, as a longtime Iron Man fan who has practically read all of the issues of the first Iron Man volume and the books from Kurt Busiek and Sean Chen, and even some of the Warren Ellis books as related to Extremis, I know how important protecting the Stark technology is to Tony Stark. And your Tony Stark, one of the reasons why he goes out of his way to protect people is because of the Iron Man armor, the greatest technological invention he ever created. And one of the things that he learned in Vietnam was how dangerous weapons are once he got caught up and got shrapnel in his heart. So your Tony Stark really, this Iron Man armor means a lot to him, and he wants to use that armor to go out here and protect people. And when he hears that his technology, which was stolen by Justin Hammer, it was sold to various different organizations, various different terrorist groups, various different international organizations, and different criminals. This is something that is very personal to Tony because the Iron Man technology, he wants to use it to make the world a better place, and he wants to use that technology to help people. And when he hears that people are using it as a weapon to do harm to others, then he wants to make sure that he is the only person who can have that technology. And that, again, it ties to his character when you look at movies like the 2008 Iron Man movie. I mean, when you look at the 2008 Iron Man movie, what motivates Tony Stark to go out on that mission to Gomera is that he does not want his weapons being used to help terrorists. So that was a major motivation for Tony Stark, and that's also what motivates him later on in the movie to use the old arc reactor to take on Obadiah Stane. And you have to understand what this technology means to Tony and as related to his character. So it's very important for Tony to be there and be the one leading this charge. And the whole thing that was a big problem for your MCU and Disney was they killed off Tony Stark in Avengers Endgame. A really bad move as I saw it. I mean, as it relates to Tony Stark, if you're going to do Armor Wars, you need Tony Stark. It just does not work with any other character. And the reason why it doesn't work with any other character is because Tony Stark is a genius and he's a great inventor. That's something Jim Rhodes just isn't. And while Jim Rhodes' motivation as related to these creators might be, oh, he wants to be able to protect the legacy of his friend, I don't think that's going to make the viewers care in the same way that they would as related to Tony Stark. Because when I look at that scene when he was putting together the armor with the repulsor rays and he was watching in Gomera, the news footage in Gomera, that is the scene where we see Robert Downey Jr.'s powerful performance, but we also see what really motivates him to stop these people from having his technology. And Jim Rhodes just would not have the same motivation because he is not emotionally invested into Stark Enterprises, and he's just not emotionally invested in the Stark technology. And your Jim Rhodes, while he is a suitable replacement for Iron Man in a temporary point and is a capable war machine, he's just not Tony Stark, and he's just not the inventor and innovator that Tony Stark was. Now, some people will say, oh, he could use the Veronica AI to do things, but that's just not going to really stand out the way Tony would stand out. Now, if you've read the Armor Wars, you know that Tony used the stealth armor that he wound up building in issue 229, a second version that he had of that armor, to take on Crimson Dynamo and Titanium Man. And eventually, when he was wearing the Silver Centurion suit, it got destroyed by Firepower in the 230th issue after that epic battle with Firepower. And the ultimate part of that story, the climax of it, was that Tony Stark was getting ready, after Firepower destroyed the Silver Centurion suit, he was getting ready to go and walk away from being Iron Man, but then after Firepower was terrorizing people with his technology, he realized that the world still needed Iron Man because as a hero, his technology was meant to protect people from the kind of terrorism that people like Firepower participated in, and the wanton violence that they used to be able to terrorize people. So that's what motivates Tony Stark to build the neoclassic Iron Man armor and take on Firepower in Iron Man 231. And all of those aspects of the story, they just don't work with James Rhodes, because James Rhodes is just, while he's a capable, competent hero, he's just not the inventor that Tony Stark is. And part of what makes Armor Wars one of the most powerful stories in the Marvel Universe is Tony Stark's creativity and inventiveness. And when I look at this decision to make an Armor Wars series without Tony Stark, it shows me how little creativity and inventiveness your Disney Plus has as related to adapting this story. Because to not have Tony Stark at the heart of one of his most definitive stories, that's something that just shows that Disney is not really being passionate about the Iron Man character, and all they're looking to do is get a quick cash grab at the expense of Disney Plus subscribers. And that shouldn't be the case when it comes down to the character that laid the foundation for the MCU. I mean, the character who laid the foundation for the MCU deserves to have one of his definitive stories presented on screen that captures the truth of the source material and captures the spirit of that source material. I mean, when I look at this decision to decide to replace Tony Stark with Jim Rhodes, I really see a bad turn for the MCU, because instead of them doing what they did from 2008 to, I say, about 2014 or 15, what they're doing now is heading into the danger zone of the DC's first Batman franchise, because in DC's first Batman franchise, we got Batman and Batman Returns from Tim Burton, and then from the late Joel Schumacher, we started to see a major deviation from the source material with Batman Forever and the disastrous Batman and Robin. And when I hear a decision to replace a lead character like Tony Stark in one of his definitive stories, I start to see how your Disney Plus is starting to deviate from the source material. And when you deviate from the source material, like they did with Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home, that's when you start heading into the danger zone that practically torpedoed the first Batman franchise and led to disastrous movies like Batman and Robin being made. Because once you start stepping away from the source material and stepping towards going into different directions, that's when you start to do things that may possibly alienate the audience that you've built over the years. And as a longtime Iron Man fan, I am alienated by this decision to replace Tony Stark with Jim Rhodes, because I know how essential this Tony Stark is to the Armor Wars. Because in the Armor Wars, you had Tony Stark going out here not only facing these bad guys like the Controller and Stiltman and many and guys like Titanium Man and Crimson Dynamo, but he was also put at odds with the West Coast Avengers, and he was also put at odds with Steve Rogers, who was the captain at the time. And he was put at odds because he was, while he was out here on this rogue mission to stop people from using his technology to do harm to others, he was putting his own professional reputation at risk. And I remember in one issue, Tony Stark fires Iron Man, and there's no way you can do that in the MCU right now because he already revealed his identity in 2008's Iron Man, but it just doesn't work. And the whole idea of an Armor Wars without Tony Stark, it just doesn't work. And to try to adapt the story, again, takes Marvel down a bad road that starts to head us down further down that path as related to deviating from the source material, the way they did with Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home, where we did not get the real Peter Parker from the comics. We start heading down the road to the MCU, starting to head down the road to making films like Batman Forever and films like Batman and Robin. And that's one of the things that makes me say that Marvel Phase 4 might be a big disaster, because the risks that they're taking like this are bad turns, and they're bad turns because what made the MCU great was the fact that we were getting comic books come to life, and that these comic books were staying true to the source material and staying true to the stories that writers like Stan Lee and David Michelinie and many others created over the years, and were staying true to the action that went on in those comics. So when I listen to them tell me, oh, Jim Rhodes is going to be the lead in the Armor Wars, and he may be getting help from Justin Hammer, which is completely out of character because Hammer was the one who sold the Iron Man technology to all these terrorists and criminals, and even these foreign states that used them in the update of Crimson Dynamo Mark III and Titanium Man Mark II. I mean, to say that you're going to do this is completely out of character, and when you start taking the characters out of their characterizations, we start again heading down the road to making really terrible films like Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, and Catwoman with Halle Berry. And I would hate to see the MCU start heading down that bad road, but sadly it is started. I saw it heading down that bad road with Spider-Man Homecoming, but this is just another bad turn, and it may be the one that finally practically turns people off from
the whole Iron Man franchise as related to the MCU, especially if it's used to lead into an Ironheart series, because that's not really a direction I believe they should go in. The Ironheart character just, again, is a complete disaster overall, and the only Iron Man that people want to see is Tony Stark, and you can't do Iron Man stories, as I see it, without Tony Stark, and you can't do his definitive stories without Tony Stark. Now, you may not be able to get Robert Downey Jr. to do these stories, but Disney really needs to think about finding, if they want to find a suitable replacement in this case, because if you're going to adapt one of the greatest Iron Man stories out here, you need to do it with Tony Stark, because if you did Ironmonger in the first Iron Man with Tony Stark, then you've got to do Armor Wars with Tony Stark too. And it's a shame that in Iron Man 2 and 3 we had no build-up to Armor Wars. Instead, we got, the story with Whiplash, which I really didn't think was that great. And then we got the Extremis, but there should have been a build-up to it, and that could have been the story that could have really made for a really great Iron Man trilogy. And what's really sad is, instead of them using Armor Wars in Iron Man 2 and 3, they try to do it now, not understanding the chance was there for them to make the Armor Wars, and they missed the opportunity, and now they're trying to come back. And if they do this the wrong way, it could become one of the biggest disasters for the MCU, as I see it, next to the Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home, which took us into deviating from the source material, and disasters that I see on the forefront like Eternals. So when I look at this whole let's replace Tony Stark in Iron Man Armor Wars, it's a really bad turn, and it's one that could possibly be one of those big flops for Disney Plus and the MCU. Now, if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up my action-packed African-American fantasy fiction, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, or the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, you can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, E-Steam: The Sands of Time. It's action and adventure in ancient Egypt in this terrific teen time travel romance. Get your copy of E-Steam: The Sands of Time at your favorite online bookseller today.